So now we're going to look at MQ. Once again, if you do not have an MQ instance created, you can just go and create one straight away. So MQ is a message queue, which is extremely important for financial applications, logistic applications, or realistically, any kind of application which requires the assurance of delivery. Differently from a classic bus-based mechanism, message queue enforces the order, enforces security, and also enforces the way the consumer and producers relate to each other. So we can start by creating a queue. So a queue is basically a place where we are going to store the messages. So we can create many different queues. When you actually create a service, the queue manager is created by the system. So you can explore things, and as you can see at the moment, the queue is completely empty. Well, nothing has been attached to it, so it's not really much to do at this stage. Here are all the options that you can find. You can go and change things if you feel like you need to get that extra granularity. One thing that you probably need to take care of is the communication. So by default, when you create a channel, it will allow you to already communicate with the external world. But once again, you can go and change things as you see fit. So to get quickly started, since the queue is done and the queue manager is already created, we can just go and create an application to basically communicate. So we say that we want to talk to the queue manager, quick start, then we want to talk to the drinks queue. We can see that, as mentioned before, the communication manager is already set. And for the security, we can just give a name. And we can also provide what kind of access we want to give. So here we basically have the credentials, the URL to connect. Here's the information if you want to attach your application to the system, and there's a number of good demos and base codes that you can use to get started, so you don't have to start from scratch. If you want to try it out, you can also just manually create a message. And as you can see, the message is there. Now, this message is going to stay in that queue until a consumer actually goes in and consumes it. This is the basic behind the queue manager or MQ. The messages have to be consumed. They're not just going to be ephemerally staying there and then magically disappear as it was a bus. So to actually go and consume and to try things out, we're going to go back to our application, to our story. And the story is that we want to follow what cases are happening. So every time a new case is created, we actually want to use message queue to communicate this because we want to have that certainty. So we're going to connect Salesforce to MQ. So every time a new case is created on Salesforce, it will be stored as a new message on MQ, waiting for a consumer to go and pick it up and consume it. So here I'm just configuring the message queue. And this is fairly simple and generally works out of the box. So I'm just going to save the entire message and just make it available to the system. Just before doing anything, I'm going to just test it out as well. So far we created one way to put messages onto the queue. And just to make sure that we have something that does look realistic, I'm gonna have a completely different flow which is gonna take care of consuming instead. So once again, we're gonna have this queue connector looking at the food queue, and every time a new message is created, it will basically pass it over to the next node. In this case, I created a simple node-based application that gets triggered once it gets called. So we can imagine that this is an external application that simply is communicating with our internal system. So we didn't have to make any structural changes to the existing application. So I have the application here just to test it, and as you can see, I can call it, so it's fine. And now I can try the whole flow, and in a similar way, everything seems to be working fine. The application responds well, meaning that the MQ is working and the system is tracking everything that it's meant to be doing. So now I'm gonna test the whole flow. So I'm checking that actually when Salesforce calls MQ, that goes into the queue and then it gets consumed by the consumer. So we're gonna run the whole thing. So once I call it, so far the whole system works, the data is going well into the system, and just to make sure, we're gonna look into MQ as well. Now the thing is, if we look at it, it will have 0 messages, and that's because it's doing exactly what it's meant to be doing. There are no messages in the queue because the producer is putting messages in and the consumer is consuming them. So it's working exactly as it should. So let's try to actually turn off the consumer and see what happens. And if we refresh this, then there you go, we have the message there, and we can see what's inside the message. So that's everything that was generated by Salesforce. So Now it's been reactivated. We can go and check again what is left in the queue. And if everything goes well, this queue should be empty again. And it is. Thank you.